It's Saturday night, April 4th, 2015, The Ochelli Effect. I am your host, Chuck Ochelli. So, we have had an interesting week in the news, haven't we? The phony war on terror continues on and on and on, and now it's getting even more confusing. Because what happens? Iranian militia, the Shia militia, helping out the Iraqi army and all that other good stuff, right? The Iraqi military, which has been, involved in all sorts of interesting misadventures. The ISIS crisis continuing and spreading all over the place. In fact, they're terrorizing their neighbors and all that other good stuff. When did we begin to involve ourselves in these types of things? Well, anybody who listens to me knows I trace all that stuff back to, and so does anybody with half a brain cell still swimming. We all trace it back to September 11th, 2001, don't we? So tonight, I have a guest that I'm really, really proud to bring to you guys because I think this is going to be one of those I'm just happy I did it interviews for sure, and I hope you guys get something out of it. Rudy Dent, who, has retired now, but was a firefighter on September 11th, 2001, the day the towers fell, is my guest. And I want to thank everybody who decided to tune in via their fondle slab of choice, utilizing their applicable application of choice, and all that kind of good stuff. Or if you came to the website, or if you're catching it on YouTube later on, or if you're trading it with your friends, I thank you no matter how you got it. I appreciate it. And, of course, the best way to go and hear the live show is to, if you're on the interwebs of webs, go to ucy.tv/TOE. A lot of nice stuff there. You can get the RSS feed. You can get the YouTube playlist link. You can get the ucy.tv playlist, all that stuff. And I thank you for it. Anyway, like I said, Rudy Dent. And this was interesting, too, because when I was doing the show with Rebecca Roth about 9/11, of course, let's see. Alrighty, then. Here we go. I love technology. It doesn't always cooperate with me, folks, just so you know. But, anyway. I was doing that show with Rebecca Roth regarding exactly what might have happened to those planes, her theories on what occurred, her knowledge about the airline industry and all that good stuff. And it was really a fascinating show. Another one of those shows that, again, I'm proud to have done. Oh, look at that. Anyway, another one of those shows which I'm proud to have done, just simply for being a participant in it. And the thing is, like I said, it was going to be a unique view on 9/11. It was. But during that show, we had a couple of interesting call-ins, and one of them was Rudy Dent. Now, Rudy I wasn't fully aware of, but at that time, I said directly that I would be more than happy to have him come on the show and tell his story about having been present, there at Ground Zero, because he actually was there when Building 7 fell. He wasn't there for when the towers collapsed, but he was there when Building 7 fell, and I said I would be more than happy to have him come on the show, right? And there we go. All right, old-fashioned way. Since they changed the Skype, it's going to make me sound less professional tonight. That's fine. But anyway, I told him that I would be more than happy to just simply have him on the show to tell his story. All right, not necessarily. Let's see now. To tell his story about that day and, all that good stuff. Wow. What do we got going on here? This is very strange. Not letting me do what it is I need to do. Alright. Well, anyway, he was a caller, and he was, calling to support Rebecca Roth, of course. And again, like I said, all right. Like I said, he had just happened to call in that night, and I thought that was great. But what we may have to do is do it this way. Well, anyway, after the show that night, right, I decided to go ahead and get in touch with Rudy, and what then ensued was a conversation where I found that he had done an interview. Of course, let me dial it back a little bit. I had seen a video out on YouTube of him briefly discussing this on one of those other networks, and here we go. Let's see now. See, this is making me go through a lot of crap in order to do this here. Let's see if we can. There we are. That should be Rudy's line ringing now. I'll tell you, this thing gave me a lot of trouble trying to connect. Mr. Dent, how are you?
Hi.
How you doing? I'm on the air.
I'm all right.
I'm on the air here. I wanted to let you know that everything you're saying is being heard, and of course I had a little trouble dialing you. All right.
Okay.
But we spoke earlier, and I was just telling everybody about how you had called into the show that I was doing with Rebecca Roth, and that I had seen a video with you out there on YouTube and discussing this. And of course, when you called in, immediately I had said to you that I would love to tell your story. And as I took a look at just the small part of the story that I caught, I got even more and more interested. And if you wouldn't mind, I've already kind of introduced you, as I said, and it's been a little bit of a technical glitch getting you on the line, but I've got you now, thankfully. But here's the deal. I called you a few days later right? And then told you that, I would just love to hear your version of events, exactly what you saw that day, because it was my understanding that you had gone into New York City after the towers collapsed, but before Building 7 collapsed, because you were a firefighter and you were most interested in trying to help your fallen brothers. And that was where I was going to pick up the story. But if you want, I mean, you can pick it up from anywhere you like. I mean, because you weren't there as the towers fell, but you did get there before Building 7, and I would like to hear your version of events.
That's, yeah, exactly on point. At any rate, at the time I arrived there, Building 7 was in fact still up. My wife worked in the area, and I was unable to get in touch with her. And I had thought about going down there to look for my wife or report for duty and work from an organized position within, the fire department, which I chose the latter to, work with my fellow firefighters. And turns out she called me later on. She was safe, that she had just gone through the towers on the way to work. And she was able to see the second plane hit from the bank that she worked in on Broadway, So that was a lucky thing, but it was a scary time, worrying about her. I did hear the explosion. I was down there. We were in a staging area over by the river. And I did hear the explosion and the rumbling, and I saw the building come down, Building 7, as did my fellow firefighters.
Well, if you wouldn't mind, could we back the whole thing up? Because here's the thing.
Sure.
That all happened in the morning, right? So
Yes.
So where were you when you heard about what was going on? How about we start there?
Oh, well, I was home, and I got a call from a family member, telling me to turn on the TV. And I turned on the TV, and just in time to see this plane circling, and I remember distinctly seeing the golden glow of the sun on it, the reflection. And I was thinking to myself, wow, it looks just like a video game, And I saw it turn, and I saw it plow into the building. So that was the second plane hitting. And from that time on, I was on the phone, and it was sometime after that I got a call from the department to come in. We were all called in on recall for that emergency.
Well,
jumped on.
Every firefighter. I'm sorry. Every firefighter was immediately called in when the first tower fell. Right? I mean, they basically said we need every man we can get as soon as that happened, or did it happen before that?
I don't know. That call may have come in later on, but I remember I got a call from the firehouse. You know what? I'm not even sure about it, to tell you the truth. I think I did, but I knew I'd be needed. So at any rate, I believe I got a call. Mm-hmm. I jumped on my bike. I did about 120 miles an hour shooting down there. I remember when I hit the Tappan Zee Bridge and the metal grating, I realized I was going way, way too fast. I mean, I've gotten road rash from going down at high speeds before, but not on metal grating. That would be the end of it. But
oh yeah,
I made it in okay. A bunch of us got together. We got our gear, and we commandeered a mail truck, and we made our way down to the fire, to the site, to the World Trade Center.
Mm.
And from there, we waited orders, to where to stage and how we would be used.
Well, at that time, had both towers fallen already? When you got there with the
They
mail
were
truck?
they when I got there, both towers were down. Everything was covered in a moonscape type gray powder that looked like and felt like talcum powder. That level of fineness,
Hmm.
I'd never seen anything like it before.
Right, and there
Um,
was a lot of confusion in the communication with you guys. I know this from speaking to other people that were there at that time, because this was totally unexpected that both of these structures were going to come down like they did. So you're getting on the scene after all this chaos has already gone down, and what was what was that like? What was the first priority there when you guys arrived with that mail truck?
well, until we got orders, we were looking around. I mean, the first impulse was to look around and see if you could do anything, if there was anything to be done. And I could see nothing to be done other than, get our orders, which was to go to the staging area and await further orders. And then from there, we would be given orders as to where they're going to deploy us and for what purpose. So that was where I saw, and heard Building 7 come down.
Mm. So what were you I'm sure you had already gotten some orders by the time Building 7 came down. What were you actually doing at the time you heard that?
Oh, I was over by the river, and I was awaiting orders. I remember we had a bus there where other firefighters had come down on, and as I said, we were just awaiting orders, to as to what we would be doing next. So when that happened, I think after it was some time later, we got our orders where we were going to be used, and we ended up working that entire night on the pile. And it was a surrealistic scene. I mean, the size of it was just incredible. It's hard to describe, but it's like you're looking from horizon to horizon, and it was all debris. And I don't know, but I didn't tell you, but I was there in 1993 when the first bomb went off. And I saw the effects of that explosion. What they said at the time, had they placed the bomb strategically in the right place, it could have had devastating effects on, possibly bringing the building down. That particular bomb.
Right, that's the whole rented truck incident in '93,
Yeah.
the first World Trade Center bombing, and you worked that scene as well. And you had probably
Yes.
been in and out of that complex for different reasons. I mean, I'm sure there was other fires that had occurred or whatever, or other reasons that you could have had for being in that area too, right? I mean, previous to that day on
Well,
scene.
I visited it for some other reason. I forget what it was, but it was business. I visited one of the offices, but as for official business, that was not my district. I worked in the Bronx. I worked out of Power Ladder 33 for most of my career. And then I later went on to Tower Ladder 52 in Riverdale, again, still in the Bronx. So I did work throughout the city on special assignment. I was a chauffeur, so I would get called to different companies to fill in as a chauffeur. So I did work around the city, but I never had called to go into the towers on a official duty, other than those days, and following after that.
Well, right, but what I'm saying is, that entire complex was pretty massive. I mean, it's not just a matter of a couple of buildings. I mean, for people to
Oh
understand,
yeah,
in total, I mean, it's a very large area. And what I'm struck by from anybody that dealt with the scene before and after is always this description of, like, it was totally unrecognizable after the
Yes.
towers collapsed. You know,
Yes.
speaking to that, your
Yes.
statement about it being such a surreal scene. So,
Yeah.
just wondered if you wanted to comment on
Uh,
that. Like,
yeah. It was like a moonscape. I'd never seen anything like it before. Everything was reduced to a fine gray talcum powder. In places, it was ankle deep, and as you walked through it, you just, you couldn't help kicking up the talcum powder dust that was everywhere. It was like the pictures you see of a moon, just gray, powdery surface.
and it's a weird thing too because I mean, Building 7 didn't collapse until later in the day. Of course, this is
Yes.
after the whole country had heard about the incident at the Pentagon, whatever you want to call it, and Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Way after all of that had already gone down, and you guys were, a lot of you guys, anyways. And when I say you guys, I mean just members of the FDNY were,
Yeah.
really just engaged in trying to see if they could dig anybody out. At that point, trying to pull the guys out that had just run in some hours before, and this is what you got involved in right away. But so the Building 7, when it went down, and you're in this surreal scene with all this dust and again, a unique scene because I mean you've been involved in other fires and things like previous to this.
Right. Right.
I mean, you've seen probably some massive fires, some small things, where you walk in and it's no big deal and it's, hardly even worth having brought the guys in, right? But you've also seen some larger ones, and you really never saw anything that resembled this in any way, shape, or form, did you?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. This wasn't a lean-to. It wasn't a pancake. It was just a complete dissolved. It was just reduced to dust. This was something else at play. It wasn't a normal fire, and it wasn't fire that brought, isolated pockets of fire that brought down those buildings.
Well, yeah, that's that's the thing about this is that nobody who examines this from taking a step back and not getting all emotionally involved, because of course this spawned a whole lot of opinions around the country that that this is the way it went down. They set these things ablaze, they collapsed, that's all there was to it. I mean, did you have suspicions right away that something was wrong, or were you just too involved with, trying to pull out your fellow firefighters? I mean, how were you feeling at the time this was all happening, and what were you thinking?
I was thinking in professional mode, and that is just awaiting orders and getting ready to do whatever was necessary. However, I was immediately suspicious because, as I said, I was in the first bombing in '93. But from that time on, I had read the PNAC, Project for the New American Century, calling for a catalyzing catastrophic event, to help bring about the New World Order. You are familiar with that piece, right?
Oh, sure, the catalyzing event, something akin to a new Pearl Harbor. Of course, yeah.
Yeah. So I was aware of that, and I'm also a Vietnam veteran. So after the first bombing in '93 and the subsequent invasion of Iraq, I knew that was coming. I knew it was a setup then. When the media played it off as if it was just developing and they really didn't know what they were going to do, and Daddy Bush was pondering this grave question as to whether or not to retaliate and invade Iraq. I knew that was all a farce, so I was really, as a veteran, having seen war and killing and all that stuff, I resented it, and I was really quite upset about it.
Well, as a Vietnam veteran, I mean, it's kind of off topic, but I mean, I might as well pose the question since we didn't discuss this, you and I. I wanted to make sure that this was raw and fresh, and we would display this for the listeners together and go through this, first time right here, nothing held back. But you know what? It begs the question in my mind. Do you know about the questions over the Gulf of Tonkin incident and exactly what happened there and what really caused us to end up, becoming fully involved in Southeast Asia? So, but were you aware of that at that time when this was all happening, or is this something you learned about later that false flags like stuff had been done?
When I went in, I enlisted. I was a super gung ho, strack, believer. I went in for 2.5 years. I wasn't even competing with anyone, and I won prestigious, awards that came with R&Rs, rest and recuperation, and so on. I was awarded Soldier of the Quarter, Soldier of the Month, Best Gunner, Best Ship, Best Vehicle, Best Driver. I used to make Colonel's Orderly. I was super strapped, super gung-ho, and I was a believer. I had read the domino theory to stop, the communist takeover of that area and to help save the Vietnamese people for democracy and all that. I really believed that.
So you were a true believer in the idea that American boys needed to go to Southeast Asia in order to prevent the proliferation of communism, because once one country falls, the old domino theory, of course, that was one of the reasons why you were sent there. That's what you believed when you were a young man. But by the time
absolutely.
But by the time the 2001 comes around, had you already learned about the Gulf of Tonkin and all these other things, and maybe it's a good idea to start to question these kind of things, or were you still in the segue? Oh,
no.
You were already there.
Absolutely. My eyes were starting to open. By the time I left Vietnam, my eyes were already open. I was a helicopter crew chief on a UH-1C armed helicopter gunship. We were more or less the SWAT team for the troops. They loved us because we gave them the close and accurate support they needed in the field. So I saw plenty of action. But before I left, I quit flying. And I went to my secondary MOS, which was a prescribed load list clerk. I was school trained for that. And after that, I volunteered to work in the villages, building latrines and helping the nuns, showing them how to apply quinine to purify the well water. Because, a lot of the Eurasian babies we left behind were dying of dysentery and, simple things like that. But I had a completely different attitude because I realized how we had been used and how, as you can see, the democracy we bring is leaving, these countries in a state of rubble.
Right. So you had graduated already from being the, gung-ho kind of guy who, again, being in a Huey and given, serious air cover on the swivel to different ground assets. I mean, that's some hardcore fighting, in the modern age, that's for sure. And you graduated from that to really wanting to volunteer into those programs that they used to say would win the hearts and minds, of those on the ground, right? But you thought that was a whole lot more of a useful, application for your skills and your energy by the time you left Vietnam. So really, by the time you were, back stateside, and you were dealing with, being a fireman and all that, you had already sort of learned that they might not always be telling you the straight truth when it comes to these different events and the reasons why they're putting young men in harm's way and things like this. You had already gotten part of that message, so it wasn't like you were completely asleep when this all went on.
Absolutely. I don't know if I told you, but I served as a police officer in New York City for 4 years prior to getting called for the fire department.
Mm.
And during that time, I worked in Harlem, which was a high crime area. And I personally witnessed, a situation where you had drug addicts and drug dealers and stick-up artists, people who grew up in a life of crime. When I first went down to look at where I would be working, I almost felt like crying. I saw these hardcore career criminals dealing drugs, and it really looked tough. And when I ended up on the street, when you ended up making an arrest, they had a rap sheet that was it looked like a small telephone book. They were career criminals, no question about it. But what I noticed was that, as I said before, when you have a system where you have a situation where education is not valued, crime is valued, the quick money that comes with it, if you're successful, appeals to the uneducated. So what do you end up with? You end up with a mother who is pregnant at an early age, ends up on drugs, ends up a prostitute, ends up with an abusive boyfriend. And so anyway, all that translates into a vicious, repetitious cycle where you have victims of victims victimizing. And I really got a good look at the picture and the prison industrial complex and realized that it's all a system and it's by design. It's not a matter of incompetence and a bunch of characters, running around, the politicians running around all confused. No, this is a desired design.
Yeah,
and it's part of a control system by which we are all controlled.
Yeah, see, now, and I'm going to reveal this to you and to the listener. The reason why I'm going into some of these areas, in case anybody is wondering, even you, is to give people a sense of exactly what kind of guy you are. I had a sense of that. And I didn't want to, make a statement. I wanted to show people what kind of guy you are, which is the kind of guy who's engaged, with actually giving a damn about the people around him. Okay, not just the idea that you were a firefighter and therefore could be putting yourself in harm's way, to help people that are in trouble. But let's go a little past that and see how you think and how you feel, and let's show people that. That's part of why I digressed into that. I just want you to know that.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it was my bet and I won. You know what I mean, with myself, that was the kind of guy you are. And I wanted to kind of make sure we gave a snapshot of that to start with before we got even more into this, because it's always good to to show people that what kind of person is making the statements that they are. And again, just having been a resident in New York City at one point, I want to say to you first, thank you. Okay, but secondly, I knew that you were this kind of guy, and I'm very glad that we're doing this tonight. So anything you want to go on to, we can go on to. If you don't have a particular direction you want to go in, I'd like to go through some more of the details of that day, just to give people a greater sense of what was going on. And then, of course, everybody is going to want to know, and I'm already getting some text questions through the Skype about Building 7, so that people want to hear about that for sure.
Okay.
And then after that, Rudy, as I told you and as I guaranteed my listeners, and again, as I said to you privately, I want you to tell your story and speak your truth, without me interrupting and anything else. But this is why I've been a little bit interrupting and trying to get in a couple of points real quick.
No, good.
Okay, I just wanted you to know that, so you don't think, why is this guy in this direction?
No, I'm absolutely comfortable with that, because I don't want to get off on a tangent and miss anything.
Gotcha. So if you want to return to that day, that's great. If you want to talk about more of this stuff, and also, just so you know, I'm exactly the same kind of guy who sees that there are a lot of control mechanisms which are put there. There's a lot of traps that are put there, that are placed in society to make people either stay down in their position or to just become grist for the mill of profit. And that could be the prison industrial complex, the military industrial complex, the pharmaceutical industrial complex. And
right.
they're shaking hands together, brother. So that's the reality. And, I'm glad you and I see the world exactly the same way. But
yeah.
But anyway, that aside, if you want to return to that day, we could return to that day unless there's something else you want to get at.
Oh, okay. Yeah, one thing that comes to mind. You're aware of Ken O'Keefe, right? He is an ex-SEAL, and he is a very, very outspoken, well-informed speaker.
The name you mentioned, Rudy, was your mouth was a little away from the mouthpiece, so I didn't get the name.
Ken O'Keefe.
Ken O'Keefe, yeah. I've tried to contact him, and I would love to have him on this show, just so you know.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
He's just mind-blowing.
Mm-hmm.
But, what was interesting about your question about wanting to know a little bit about me was that I noticed that I was raised by my maternal grandmother who had nothing to give me but unqualified love, And that's interesting because I heard him talking about himself, and he described himself the same way, that that's how he was raised, So he is not talking from a position of hate, but he's talking from a position of dedication to justice and love for liberty and justice for all. So, I noticed that most of the outspoken and obsessed people in the truth movement have all had a common trigger that has gotten them going. You've had Rebecca on, and she and I have spoken before, and, having been a flight attendant, she went through an immediate trauma and then an obsession that drove her through 13 years of research to finally end up with writing that book. So I noticed a commonality in most people who are driven toward trying to get the truth out to the public once they see what is actually going on.
Yeah, that's the bottom line too. Because in a lot of private conversations, I notice that the people that have a real integrity about wanting to, get real information out to people, there is not one of them that has lived a sheltered, padded life. Somebody at some point nurtured them and loved them, but almost always they are pushed forward by some pain which was given to them, by some serious gut check that was given to them by reality. And it does seem to be a common bond, I would say. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. So, okay, where are we?
So if you don't mind, if we go back to that day, and absolutely on point, I'm so glad again, and I can't thank you enough for having come on, but back to the story at hand, for you're there, you're waiting, your whole motivation, essentially is to try and help. This is what you're there for. You're waiting, orders and all that. And then when did you first get an idea that building was going to come down, or what was happening?
I had no idea it was going to come down until I saw it come down. But I later saw, the incontrovertible, videos where you have the workmen walking away and they're saying, okay, let's clear the area, the building's coming down, we're going to blow it up. So, there is no question about it being a controlled demolition, not to mention, all the architects and engineers with Richard Gage, Danny Jawenko, over 2,300 experts have already come forward and explained that there was no question whatsoever, but that was, in fact, a controlled demolition. Right. And remember, no plane ever hit Building 7.
Oh, right, exactly. And Richard Gage has been on this show and discussed the collapse of Building 7, just so you know.
Yeah.
And quite well. But I'm wondering about your personal observations that day. I mean, did you hear a rumbling? Did it just catch your attention? I mean, did you see anything on the ground? Because obviously, I mean, I don't think you were close enough to the building at the time to see people leaving it and all that from where you were, right?
No.
I mean, so what did you see? Just suddenly this giant structure just fall? I mean, it just went.
Actually, what happened? What happened? I am a Vietnam veteran, and I'm used to explosions going off all around me and all that. Initially, when you hear your first explosion, it's an involuntary recoil. Your body just goes into shock, and you recoil. I'm pretty much used to that from being around artillery and explosions and so on. But what caught me was to see my fellow firefighters, go into that recoil. That caught my eye before the explosion got my attention, right?
So it was sort of like the people around you reacting is what really got your attention. Sort of like, I mean, if you're in the field for a while, the sounds of gunshots don't make you flinch at all, and you get used to it. So when you're exposed to it later, it doesn't bother you. Same kind of thing, but in this case, much larger noise. So really, what got your attention was the reaction of
that
was around you.
That was the first thing, to see the way they jumped. Because normally you don't see firefighters react like civilians, but in that particular instance, they did. So that caught my eye, and then, of course, I heard the explosion and saw the building come down at apparent free fall. And that was that, We still stayed in place waiting for our orders, which were, if I remember correctly, it was until later that night that we got organized and mobilized, and we started working in designated groups covering specific areas, doing the search into the night and throughout the entire night.
Well, and see, to clarify for the listener, because I know this from speaking to others who worked the scene, the thing was, after the second tower fell and before Building 7 fell, I understand why you were kind of, because it would almost seem to a listener right now that you weren't doing anything for a long time. There was a lot of confusion, and it did take quite a while to organize everybody. First of all, the island was shut down, so when you went in there, you were probably part of the last flow of traffic to get in there, because very soon after the attacks, the entire island was sealed. There was no way to go in or out. So that was the first thing. The second thing was, with all of the traffic having jammed, trying to flee the area and everything else, it kind of created a unique sort of gridlock, right?
Yeah.
And so,
and to answer, go ahead. To answer your question, when we got there immediately, we wanted to spread out over the pile and start searching and so on. But it was shortly thereafter that we got the orders to go to the staging area and await further orders. And from there, we were mobilized, as I stated.
And then there was also a communication breakdown, right, with the radios and everything. So, I mean, when you grabbed gear, did you grab radios too, or?
No, we didn't take radios with us, because those radios, we just have a set amount of radios, for the designated members in the company. So they're not extra radios for us to take with us. So no, we didn't. The people who had radios were the people who had actually responded there officially.
Right.
We who got down there on the recall were not, equipped with additional gear.
Right. So you went down there with just like helmets and the coats, right?
Yeah, our turnout gear, maybe some additional tools, but not much, as I recall. We were there with just our basic turnout gear, and that was it.
Mm. And meanwhile, waiting for this. So, I mean, what was going on while you were waiting? I mean, obviously, like I said, that's why I was trying to set the scene with the traffic and everything.
Yeah.
They were trying to block off the area.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of confusion because this wasn't something, typical that ever happened where you had a complete building collapse. I mean, you might have, say, a brownstone collapse now and then if it's really been raging a while and this kind of stuff. But generally speaking, that episode occurs. That's the end of it. It creates damage in the surrounding buildings, and you guys control what happens afterwards, and then it's done. But in this case, there was kind of like a not sure what's going to happen next kind of thing that was going on with you guys, wasn't there?
Well, no, that was immediately afterward, and you could see that in the videos where the brothers were still talking. You could hear them saying, "This isn't done yet. There's still bombs there. These buildings can still get blown up." And I believe that was even after the first building came down. You saw injured firefighters sitting there and so on. By the time we got there, everything was pretty much settled. It was, as I stated, a moon state. It had been cleared out. Most of the people were already out of the area. And when we did get there, we did go out immediately to survey the entire area before we got ordered to report to the staging areas and await further orders. So that's pretty much the way it went, from the beginning.
And then when you got dispatched, I mean, what did you end up doing?
We started working the piles. We started searching. We started trying to crawl in between crawl spaces and stuff. And by that time, it started getting dark. I remember it was dark, and I could see the molten lava-like, pockets deep in the rubble. Molten metal. I mean, it was never seen anything like that before.
So there's this glowing sections in the breaches between the debris. It
looked just like a volcano when a volcano's flowing.
Mm.
You saw these big, round piles of glowing metal.
Right.
So another thing is that we had expected to see massive amounts of bodies, DOAs, and DOA is dead on arrival, right? And later on, during the day, and in subsequent searches when I did come back, I didn't personally find the bodies that I was looking for. What I did find was people's clothing, like T-shirts and socks and stuff like that had survived, but without even bloodstains in them. I mean, it seems like people were just vaporized.
See, I have heard this before that though at first you were digging for live victims,
Yeah.
first of all, you didn't come up with those, right?
Right.
You didn't
Right.
take anybody alive out of the debris, and then on
Right.
top of it, you didn't find anything that seemed to be recognizable remains of people. You might have found their effects,
Right.
a piece of
Exactly.
pocketbook, a shoe, something like that. But you weren't finding, like a hand or an arm or, or nothing like that.
Yeah. No. What I did find was pieces of the mask. Those things seem to survive. Our self-contained breathing apparatus, the breathing mask that we use. I did find pieces of them. I did find pieces of the mask, right? And later on, we did find, firefighters and stuff buried in the rubble. But it was quite a surprise. We didn't find the number of bodies we expected to find. It seems they were all vaporized.
Right, and to relate, when you did find firefighters later, of course, we saw images on television of them stopping work and, and carrying, the bodies.
Extremely emotional scene. When I worked in the police department, it's both of them are semi-military organizations. But in the police department, we don't have the camaraderie that you have in the fire department. In the fire department, everybody pretty much knows everyone's family, their wives, their kids. There are a lot of social events that we attend. And to lose a brother, in the fire department, it's like losing family. It really was an impact. So yeah, it was tough.
I mean, and that being said, did you pretty much know, just about every one of the guys that it was 300 and some odd?
343 guys, and it was 60 police officers, or a combination of police officers and auxiliary police and so on. But no, you don't know every one of them. But I did have 3 very close, outstanding friends who did that I did know. That was Kenny Kumpel, Tommy O'Hagan, and Bruce Van Hines. And I mean, Kenny, Bruce, and Tommy O'Hagan. Tommy was the kind of human being. I don't know if you ever meet him in life, you know that he is on his way to bigger and better things. He's just on his way to wherever. Tommy, I wouldn't have been surprised if he ended up president of the United States. Super bright guy. He made lieutenant. He and I worked together in '52, and then he made lieutenant. He went to the city, and he was working in one of the companies in the city that responded to the area. Bruce Van Hines was another incredible human being, and as was Kenny Kumpel. So that was really tough for me. I took that personal. Took me a long time to get over, getting very emotional over that.
Right.
And add to that knowing in my gut that this was a false flag. It was not due to isolated pockets of fire. One thing we do know is we know our job, and we know when we knock down a fire, we know just what's needed for the size of fire to knock it down. And everybody heard and knows it's an incontrovertible fact that the guys were calling for additional lines to knock down isolated pockets of fire, period. So,
right.
not fires, yeah.
No, I was going to say not far from the point of impact of one of the planes, actually. I've listened to a few times one of the gentlemen calling for one additional line. And he was there by himself saying that, listen, I can knock this down. If I just got one more line, we can take care of this. And firefighters don't say stuff like this unless they know what they're looking at already. This was the kind of thing that they were dealing with. Sorry, go ahead.
Absolutely, because our lives depend on it. That's one of the things when we have professional interchange of information while operating. The information we share is absolutely professional, it's absolutely knowledgeable, and you can bet your life on it because your life does depend on it.
Well, not only would your life depend on it, but I mean, if you were switched in that situation, here's the thing. You're also responsible for whoever it is you're going to bring in there in your mind. So you're not going
Oh,
to tell
yeah.
these other guys, come on in and help me with this, unless you know that it's, it's a doable deal. Because the thing is, if
Yeah,
you're going to bring in these other guys and all of you are going to risk your lives together, you're not going to,
exactly.
you're going to be very careful about, listen, we can do this, or you know what, we need to back off of this because we can't get at this, or this can't be controlled, or this is going to collapse, or you guys know these kinds of things, through experience, through your training. So
I can tell you something to reinforce that. If
okay,
you're up in the 10th floor, or let's say the 80th floor, whatever, right? And you
right,
pull a gun on somebody and you tell them jump, they're not going to jump. You're going to have to shoot them. But just the slightest hint of burning alive in a fire invokes such panic and fear in people that even before the fire gets to them, they jump out of panic, out of fear, just choking on the smoke and the fear of the fire coming to them. Just, the heat and stuff, it just invokes panic. And are you still there?
oh yeah, I'm still here.
Oh, okay. So, now keep that in mind. It's something that invokes panic, and people voluntarily will jump to their death to escape a greater horror of burning alive. Now, when we go in there, we're well aware of that. And firefighters, as the joke goes, are the only ones that you see dumb enough to be rushing into a fire when every other living thing is running out of it,
Right.
But when we do, we depend on each other. We know our jobs, we know what we're doing, and we're very professional about what we do. But the important thing is we trust each other with our lives. That's why we're able to do an aggressive interior attack. We know our brothers will pull us out. We know we'll go that extra mile to pull a brother out. So there's a special bond that is hard to describe. I hope you get an idea of what I'm talking about amongst firefighters.
Oh yeah, that's part of the point I was trying to make, is that when you went there to try and pull people out, one of the primary concerns, I mean, you would have been happy to pull anybody out of there alive for sure, but the thing is, one of the primary concerns is that that your other brothers, had the situation been reversed, they wouldn't have left you there. They would have been digging to find
you.
And that was part of what you were doing. And it's hard to describe to anybody, and I'm not even saying that I totally understand it. I'm just trying to give people a sense of that. As we go forward and describe this, because you were there at that time, and then you started on this work. You wind up not being able to pull anybody out alive. You're finding all this strange stuff. I mean, I'm sure it was extremely heartbreaking, and it had to be shocking, because I mean, as far as I know, there's never been that kind of loss among the New York City Fire Department. In one day.
Absolutely. And for me, one of the traumas that really kept haunting me, it wasn't just the loss of really special friends, but it was the image that stayed with me of one of my fellow firefighters, where his wife came to pick him up with his kids, and they're on their way off to the ball game. Firefighters are devoted to their family. I mean, I've seen incredible devotion on the part of firefighters with their kids and their family. And I kept seeing that picture over and over of one of my firefighters that I lost, and it was really, really difficult for me to deal with that loss, realizing that it wasn't just him that was gone, but it was the loss to his family, Um,
Right.
so,
And meanwhile,
yeah,
there's more than 200 of those stories, and you know that. That's
yeah,
the thing, and to have that all happen on one day, and then of course to not be able to, as I said, not because you guys didn't know what you were doing, but the fact is that there was just no way to recover anybody from that
yeah,
devastation. So there it
yeah.
was, and meanwhile, in your own mind, immediately, the whole thing kind of stunk because it didn't come across to you as something that would have naturally occurred. I mean, if there had been
Right.
a large scale fire, losses happen, and you're aware of that, and so is everybody else. But to that sinking, sick feeling that had to come from the idea that, first of all, there's something stinks here, something's way wrong here. I mean,
I was in
when
a state of controlled rage, and a newspaper reporter came to me to ask me what I thought of the situation, right? And I quickly deferred him to the superior officer, whoever it was, lieutenant or the captain, for two reasons. I knew what I would be saying would be not what anybody would want to hear, and that is that I knew it was a phony event, a false flag. But also, being in a semi-military organization, we don't have the authorization to make public comments to the media without authorization. So therefore, I deferred it up the chain of command to the superior officer I directed him to go talk to them. Had he talked to me, and also you had all the grieving families, so I really didn't want to get into that.
Well, right, you didn't want to say something that would reflect badly on your friends, your friends who had fallen, their families,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
if you said something too out of line with the party line at that time, it could have been taken as a bad reflection on all of you, and
exactly.
this is the
And
mentality there, and this is why a lot of firefighters didn't have
and
much to say at first, I think.
exactly, and actually still don't. And the reason for that is they're very, very, as I was when I was a kid, very patriotic. If that's the official line, that it was fires brought them down, and these are professional people. They go along with it. And for what I've seen, for the most part, they're accepting this. Except for the guys that were there and are now retired or dying or died. There are the ones who know. But there are new guys who've come on, and they are accepting the official party line. Remember, there's politics involved. If the official line comes down the chain of command all the way through the mayor, to the fire commissioner, to the chief of a department, that's what it is. If they say that's what it is, that's what it is.
Well, I mean, and so carrying on though, I mean, you continued on after that day. You were there too, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah. Many other days I came back and we searched. I remember one day in particular that I found an unexplored cavern. I mean, there were huge caverns within the rubble that were just wide open spaces. And I discovered one, and I needed a rope to lower me down in there so that I could make an immediate, search to see if maybe I could find someone in a car. It was underground parking or something that I had discovered. There were cars in there, and I wanted to search, of course, and see if there's any life in there. Now, FEMA was there the night before.
Mhm.
You do know that, right?
Oh yeah, they claimed that they were
Yeah.
there for what do they call those drills that were going to occur
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
short distance from the complex, and they just happened to be there in advance
Yeah.
of drills that were going to take place like a little later in the week, I think. And I think
Yeah.
that's the official claim. But of course, yeah, they were already on the scene.
Right. So when I wanted to go in there, the captain was obviously under orders for us not to venture into areas without authorization. And matter of fact, he got angry with me for, being aggressive in terms of wanting to get in there and search the area, because his orders were to refer it to FEMA so they could go in there and do the search. So if we found any open pockets, and to me, being a firefighter, to give it up to civilians, that's our job. It wasn't FEMA's job, but they took priority on that particular situation.
Right. And during this time in the mainstream media, what we were hearing is that there was the possibility of what they were calling voids in the debris, where there was this remote possibility as time ticked on that people could have survived in these so-called voids. And this is exactly what you're talking about, where you found kind of a parking structure that hadn't been completely smashed, where if somebody had been standing there, they could have survived through the collapse and all that. And
exactly.
And meanwhile, you're being pulled away from doing what would be your job normally, to do a search and rescue in that area, and it's being deferred over to these FEMA guys, who are mostly, for the most part, just civilian guys.
Yeah. So why, on our way of thinking, they're civilians. That's our job. That's our area of expertise. We're the professionals there, not them. Right. So to have to stand back, and especially when our own are missing, that's a hard pill to swallow.
Well, I had heard that there was actually even a couple of scuffles between firefighters and some of those people that were trying to pull them back out of situations like that. You never know all of what you hear is actually real or whatever. But, did you see anything like that?
No. All I know is that I was, my captain was a pretty, easygoing guy, but I got chewed out for being aggressive in terms of wanting to get in there. And so, there was pressure. There was they were under orders. That is, our superior officers, to comply with whatever standard operational procedure they were ordered to comply with.
Right. And did you see other civilians or other agencies stepping in during this time? And we're talking about just the first few days or the first few weeks afterwards. Were there others? I do know also, and just speaking nicely about some of the civilians, I also know that there was an outpouring of support for you guys working down there.
It was incredible.
Only because I was part of it. As I said to you when you called into my show, you might have very well drank out of some of the cases of water that we were sending there, because we were trying to send everything we could to assist you guys, in the efforts to hopefully find someone alive. But if not, just the fact that we're doing this work, we were sending in water and towels and, some dried food stuff and everything else, in support of you guys. So, that was one of those things that went on, during that time. And I know that you had, mentioned to me about
I saw that. And by the second day, it was like a town had sprung up with tents and goods that were donated by various businesses, from tools, gloves, masks, of course, water and things like that, all donated, by businesses and civilians and so on. And what struck me is in the mornings, subsequent mornings on the way to the pile, we would be going down there. It would be cold and windy, and you'd see civilians standing there for hours just waiting for the firefighters on their way in, and waving a flag and waving us on, and showing their patriotic fervor and support of us, That was quite emotional to see. For me, it was, you know. It tells me that there is a patriotic fervor in America. You know, Americans still believe in America. They just don't know how corrupted our government has become.
Mm. So, and were you there when the president went down there, or?
No, I didn't see that. No.
Okay, I never asked you, so I was just curious. I mean, it's just
Yeah,
one of those things I
yeah,
thought of. Is that image of W standing there, making that
yeah.
speech? But
That to me, by that time, it made me want to throw up. It was disgraceful because I knew it was all show.
how was you had to have seen Rudy Giuliani though at some point while you were down there because he was all over the place, wasn't
Yeah, and at one point, Giuliani and Von Essen were actually missing. They nobody knew where they were, and I assumed that, to my recollection, the only building still left standing at that time was Building 7. So I assumed that they were in Building 7. I know they went into a building, and nobody knew where they were. There was no communication, and that later on they did reemerge. And I believe, to my recollection, it was Building 7, but I can't be absolutely sure of that.
Well, that's where the emergency command post was supposed to be.
Exactly.
For all that.
Exactly.
So that would have been a logical place for Rudolph Giuliani, who was the mayor at that time, to be. Of course, Bernie
Yeah.
Kerik and Rudy Giuliani are most famously, videotaped walking around with the masks on and all that kind of stuff. But
Exactly.
I know from living in the city that Giuliani was very much the kind of guy who would be there during any major event anyway. This was the kind of guy that he was. I'm not even making any commentaries about him, but I'm just saying this is the type of person he was, and so I knew you had to have seen him at some point because I knew he was all over the place. But then missing at one point and then reemerging, yeah, that was kind of a strange thing too. I think that's been long.
Yeah.
I
can tell you this, as long as we're being real here,
Mm-hmm.
He was not a popular person with the fire department. All right, and his thing was he liked to grab the spotlight. He liked to be around to take credit for whatever, and appear to be, really on top of things. When in fact, we were not too happy with him. And as history has unfolded, you had Kerik, who ended up in jail later on. So it tells you a little bit about the character. And Von Essen was a firefighter who was a friend of Giuliani, and he got promoted and bypassed the whole chain of command and made, the fire commissioner. And there was a lot of ill feelings over that. Because see, most officers study for years. I mean, you study 4 years to become a lieutenant, and then you continue studying to become a captain, and then you continue studying to become a chief. And we have no problems whatsoever in trusting our lives to our superior officers because they are, for the most part, extremely competent, and they're in the fire with us. It's not that they stand out in the street and order us in. They're in there with us, So, I mean, we are a tight-knit organization, where there's a lot of respect and love for our fellow firefighters. And the chain of command is they're still one of the guys. They may be an officer, but they're one of the guys.
Right, and this is one of the big distinctions between a police department and a fire department.
Exactly.
Is that with a police department, you got a superior officer, and a lot of times sitting behind a desk and sending out people to do things. But in the
Right.
case with firefighters, you got your superior officers are down in it with you.
Exactly.
They are one of you. They're not
Right.
just sitting on high
Right.
and ordering you. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's a really good point.
Uh,
I'm glad you mentioned that. Um,
Best way to describe it is their family. They're part of the family.
right, right, and that's a different thing because now with that familiar relationship, again, this is a different kind of perspective when it comes to sending somebody else into harm's way. Right?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So anyway,
I Yeah.
no, go ahead. If you want to say something, go.
Well, I remember one particular very emotional scene is what we were working one afternoon into the night, and one of the guys was suffering from oh God, dehydration and so on. He'd been working the pile for a long time. They were trying to order him to leave the pile and go take a break, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was only he and I who understood the bond that kept him there, and he would not leave. There was no way he was going to leave because they had just discovered remains of his missing fellow firefighters in his company,
Right.
and there was no way that anybody could order him away until the brothers were recovered. And it was a very emotional scene. It's still hard to even talk about it, but I understood, where he was coming from. He knew I understood, and we understood each other. But there were others who had no clue as to, how deep the bond runs and the level of dedication we have toward each other. My very first job was a taxpayer where I was upstairs working with I was a truckie and I was overhauling, and the next thing I know, a beam came down as a lean-to, and the second it hit me, I just went limp and I went down, and the next thing I know, I was out in the street. The engine was putting water on the fire. I was opening up so that they could get the water on the fire, and they dove right in there and they got me out there. And before I knew it was like the next thing I know, I was out in the street. They had pulled me out, That's the kind of aggressive, it's just heroism every day, just
Right.
complete heroism where, the guys they put themselves second. They put the other person first, It was
Right.
the same thing with pulling people out with a mask. We take off our mask and we give them the mask and we choke, on the fire.
Well,
And we pull them out.
Speaking of the masks and everything, I mean, and I'm
Yeah.
not going to try and belabor the scene too
Mm-hmm.
much, but I mean, it was hard to breathe down there. You guys had to wear the masks and everything, just to
Yeah.
down there. And this is long after the collapses had already happened. I mean,
Yeah.
did you wind up getting sick from any of that, or do you?
Yeah, I had lung problems for quite some time. I was spitting up a black and grayish mucus, and I had trouble breathing, and I had to go for a lot of treatment in respect to that. And my lungs are still a little bit sensitive to changes in temperature and so on.
Mm.
What we have been doing is going for an annual checkup where we get a thorough checkup every year to check for cancers and so on. And I can't confirm the numbers, but from what I hear, the cancers are starting to come in now from the exposure to that toxic cocktail.
Right.
The asbestos mixed in with all other types of things, plus the fact that we were wearing masks for to filter the debris,
Mm.
and it was the wrong size filter, so that the debris was finer than the filtering capability of a mask. So we were taking a feed even when we thought we were protected. And from what I understand, the numbers are quite high now. They may be even higher than the 340 that we already lost, on that day due to cancers and so on.
Right. I mean, there's no telling exactly how many guys actually paid for it later that were there trying to dig through this all and everything else. And I wonder, did we miss any points about that situation that you think people need to hear about, in this conversation, or?
No, just as I described, it was just a moonscape, and it was unlike anything I had ever seen in my entire career. I've seen collapses before. A collapse is just, it's either a lean-to or a pancake, and you get debris and stuff, and they are dangerous and so on, but nothing like what we saw on that day with pyroclastic clouds that are the same thing that is generated when a volcano goes off, and then again, seeing the molten lava-like steel, something else was going on there, something not normal to normal fires. And as time went on, we've learned what the experts had brought to our attention, that they did in fact find thermite in the debris, and that there is evidence of explosives having gone off. So those, there's no question that those buildings were brought down, and yet the government is still holding on to that ridiculous conspiracy theory that they tried to sell us for this false flag operation, which was nothing more than a compliance with the PNAC's dream of, bringing about a new Pearl Harbor, which they in fact did. I don't know if you know this or not, but we lost more people on 9/11 than we did at Pearl Harbor.
Oh, yeah. No, that's absolutely true. And of course, it did allow them to continue forward with the agenda they wanted, because after all, the idea of the catalyzing event was to rebuild, after all, the title, Rebuilding America's Defenses. This is what it was about, was to feed the machine. Again, one of those industrial complexes we talked about earlier.
The military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned us about, remember?
That's right. Exactly, in his farewell speech, yes.
And that's exactly what has occurred. And, as I see it, I'll give you my summation of what has happened now.
Well,
our government...
Right. What I was going to say is this, is that, coming from that situation, okay, you're angry, first of all.
Yeah.
You're hurt because, your brothers have fallen. These are people that meant something to you, whether you knew their names or not, because we've demonstrated both things here, that you had personal people that were, dear to your heart, that you knew by name, but even the ones that you didn't necessarily know, you had a kinship to because of this brotherhood.
Yeah.
And all of this, pain, the fact that you realize that you've been had, okay, to put it, kind of in a real, not so sophisticated way, but the fact is, you've been lied to, okay?
Yeah.
And this is, again, the government trying to control the situation. We didn't talk too much about that, but I'm sure you could talk more about that, where the government was trying to control the situation on the ground, which is effectively a crime scene, no matter what theory you believe, okay?
Yeah.
So you're coming from that, and then moving forward, okay, I'm sure you learned a lot more since then from what your own eyes told you. You learned a lot more.
Yeah.
You have your views about what has actually happened here and what it is that you believe about it. And I absolutely want to just open it up and let you explain that any which way you want to, from your words, without my interruption or anybody else getting in the way.
Okay. I live this every day of my life. There's not a day that I can goes by that I don't have this on my mind. I got on Facebook and I was initially banned under my name, Rudy Dent, and I was not allowed to open up a new account under my name. So I had to change my name, my phone number. I was even thinking of resorting to changing my IP account in order to be able to open a new account on Facebook, which I did under the name Rudy Vulcan. And that's where I'm at, and I address this each and every day, and I write about it openly. They haven't banned me yet, but I'm getting my message out to people all over the world and doing what I can to wake people up. I believe that if each one could reach just one, there would be an exponential explosion of information that would bring about a paradigm change, a paradigm shift of mindset in the American people, all of a sudden being aware of the fact that they've been lied to by their trusted mainstream media and their government. And that would bring about, I would say, a revolution for the core values that we originally stood for.
No, absolutely. This is exactly the point of, the alternative media explosion, that has kind of gone on in the past decade. All of us trying to reach out and do exactly what you're saying, which is, reach people and get them to understand that, that the wool has been pulled over their eye. I often think back to that statement by Malcolm X, about how you've been had. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you've been had, you've been took, you've been bamboozled. And he also, even then, before the age of computers and the net, which is such a blessing in terms of the ability to do research and come across things that you never would have been aware of. There's an information explosion available to us, but the mainstream media is the most effective weapon of mass deception and public manipulation the world has ever known. We have all been the victims of 24/7, lifelong indoctrination by the mainstream media, and which is nothing more than a tool for propaganda to tell us what to think and even what to feel. We all have trusted celebrity prostitutes come into our home 24/7, and with a raised eyebrow, they can turn a story any way they want. They tell us how to think about it and how to feel about it. And we trustingly go with it as if it's gospel. If the New York Times doesn't say it so, well, it must not be news and it's not worth discussing. That's the mindset. But slowly, people are waking up and realizing that the mainstream media is just show business. So we are making progress. I believe people are becoming far more aware than they were prior to these events having occurred.
Well, right. It was one of the most massive psychological attacks on the general public, in history. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And ever after. It wasn't just that day either. It was the continuous repetition of the imagery, the continuous repetition of ramping up people's sentiments to charge them up. You had people volunteering to go into the military who might not have done it otherwise to protect and stand up for their nation.
Think about it. Think about it. It's been an effective tool to bring about exactly what they wanted, and that was perennial war. War on terror is a sophisticated Wall Street slogan of a bullet, that is ridiculous, because terror is a condition. if you really want to eliminate something, you deal with the cause, not the condition. War on terror is a ridiculous misnomer. Support the troops is a well-intentioned trick that tricks people into actually supporting the government, not the troops. Because if you were supporting the troops, you'd bring them home.
Oh yeah, what you're saying there, and just to clarify really quick, and I know what tell me I'm wrong if you want, but what it is that support the troops sounds like a positive sentiment. It's one of those things that everybody should be able to agree to, because why wouldn't you support the troops? It totally detaches the idea of what's actually going on, and if you don't support the troops, in fact, you're a bad guy. So now it draws this greater thing.
You're unpatriotic.
Right, but what it actually means, if you translate it into real speak, is not support the troops, support the wars. Because again, like you're saying, if you support the troops, you would want them out of harm's way. You would want them to come home to their families.
Exactly.
If you're really supporting them, you'd want them to be paid better, protected better, and not also sucked into these wars for profit. And also wars for the sake of warfare. I mean, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what you mean, right?
Absolutely. We all remember when Cheney's, Halliburton, friends, and so on got the contracts without even competing to take care of specific needs of our troops in Iraq. And when it was discovered that they were stealing money and so forth, the investigations that should have followed and the stop of payment that should have followed never occurred. They continued paying them, and they went on with business as usual. Mm-hmm. There were a lot of criminal actions that were performed right before our eyes. I mean, the destruction of the crime scene at the very beginning was a classical case of violation of the basic thing in any investigation is to protect the crime scene. They didn't do that. They destroyed it. They suppressed any attempt at a real investigation. It took, about a year by the families constantly pushing and lobbying to get an investigation going. And when they finally did, the amount of money that was given toward this phony investigation, which the people involved in the investigation will tell you themselves, right? They spent less money on this investigation than they did on the Clinton affair, with Monica Lewinsky.
Right. There was more money literally spent on trying to figure out how the stain got on the blue dress in the Clinton-Lewinsky affair than it was trying to figure out how 3,000 people died on American soil. That's the most horrendous and disgusting facts of history that you can possibly offer about this, and you're exactly on point, sir. And
here's
Go ahead.
Here's what I crystallized clearly in my mind is that we send our sons and daughters off to fight wars based on lies, to kill false flags and lies, to kill people we have more in common with than the people who are sending us. Our sons and daughters go expecting to be greeted as liberators, bringing democracy, when in fact they find themselves confronted as hated occupiers. And when they're there, they are forced to live and fight in an environment that causes them to do things that their basic American core values are not able to live with. So then they come back in boxes, they come back missing limbs, and they come back with PTSD, that is post-traumatic stress disorder, and TBI, which is, traumatic brain injury from being bounced around inside of their armored vehicles when they get blown up in them, and they get brain concussions and so on. And now they are committing this, I don't know if you knew this, but they are now, our American troops are committing suicide at a rate of 22 per day. Mm-hmm. And this is how they're used and discarded. And I don't know if you're familiar with Henry Kissinger's famous quote about American soldiers.
I'm unfortunately familiar with a little too many of Henry Kissinger's quotes.
All right. Military men are dumb, stupid animals to be used as pawns for foreign policy. Mm-hmm. And that was Henry Kissinger, and the Jewish-American politician and advisor, quoted by Monica Jensen and Stevens, Kiss the Boys Goodbye, Dutton, 1990, page 97. Citing the final days, Woodworth and Bernstein, Simon & Schuster, 1976. Mm-hmm. There's no question. He actually said that. Military men are stupid animals to be used as pawns for foreign policy. So there you have, this elite of psychopaths who care nothing for American values or the American public, but their wars of global hegemony and profit for corporations and such.
Right, and of course, Kissinger is not just limited to his contempt and disdain for American people. All you have to do is take a look to his advisory position regarding the bombing of Cambodia during the Nixon administration, absolute savage bombing of that country, of those people, the continuous contempt for human life in general, not just servicemen, guy, but anybody. Anybody.
An international war criminal with a long string of crimes against humanity. And this is the guy that they wanted to put in charge of the 9/11 investigation.
Yeah,
you're aware of that, right? And of course, he couldn't stand the stand the smell test. They had to get rid of him.
Look, even though people in this country are somewhat asleep, they can't be that asleep to not know that would have stunk. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah. The thing is that they have to start getting past their trust of the mainstream media and realize that the mainstream media is owned by the very elites who use it as a tool, a psychological tool, to get us to do whatever they need us to do.
Right. It is the interconnected, great six, it might be down to five great corporations at this point that are engaged only in the, in the work of controlling the minds of the population to keep them ill-informed, to keep them, compliant at all times, and to assure that they can conduct business, without too much fanfare or resistance from the people that they're supposed to be, protecting, informing, and relating the news to, and things like this. No. Let's not do that. Actually, they're meant to keep us in the dark and distracted. That's why I often say that
absolutely
these issues are weapons of mass distraction, like to borrow that phrase and make it sound like it, right? So a weapon of mass distraction that has absolutely done its job rather well, at least for the past half a century, easily. Yes. And I know we can argue about how early it goes back, but it is a long-standing tradition in this country.
It is.
And it is unfortunate. And you know what?
I call it mass deception and public manipulation. That is the effectiveness and how it's used. And here's William Casey, CIA director, 1981, quote unquote. We'll know our disinformation program is complete when everything the American public believes is false. Now, if you think about when, we are children, and or when you have your children, you tell them fairy tales that makes it easier to control them. You know, you tell them if they're not good, the boogeyman's going to get them. And, you know, come Christmas time, if they're not good, you know, Chris Jingle, whoever's going to know whether they've been good or not, you know, or nice and, you know, and all that. And it works to a certain extent until they grow up. You follow me, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the whole concept of Santa Claus.
When we grow up, when we become adults, the government treats us exactly the same way. They tell us the lies they feel they need to tell us in order to keep us in line so that they can stay where they are and they can keep us where we are. And we become the enemy to them.
Well, right, exactly, and it works like this. You know, the government tells the stories. You know, the government creates the stories, and they give it to the storytellers who are working with them to make sure that the children pay attention and just listen to the fairy tales, so that they worry about who's watching them and who's naughty and who's nice, and what all of that actually means and everything else. If they're not keeping us distracted, they're trying to instill fear. And if they're not doing that, they're trying to make sure that we don't trust one another or anyone else except that stream of disinformation that's coming at us, like you said, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that's what the reality is. Look, we're down to less than 20 minutes, okay, just so you know.
Okay.
And I did promise you, and I have said, and I'm sorry, I do interject and talk a little bit.
No, that's okay.
But, you know, I wanted to give you the opportunity to say whatever it is that was on your mind about this and going forward. But we are running low on time, so if there's something else that you wanted to make sure that you included in this conversation, my friend, I want to make sure that you had that platform to get it out.
Okay, I'll tell you this. We Americans and the people of the world have been lied to in order to be controlled. You control the masses by telling them lies, telling them whatever you feel is needed for them to believe in order to comply with the social order that keeps the controllers in power. You know, the ultimate expression of power is control, you know, and the sociopaths and psychopaths at the top of the food chain, the hidden elites, not only want power, which they've always had. Money is no object. I mean, that they can print out of thin air anytime they want. But they want the hearts and minds of the people too. They want you to love them. When they are the worst enemies society has, you know, to mankind. So I'd like to say this. John F. Kennedy was the last real president that we had. And why is that? Because he stood up to the hidden elite, and he gave his speech, I call it his dead man walking speech, where he stated, "For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, and armies by night, guerrillas by night instead of armies by day," and so on and so forth. I'm sure you remember that speech. And his intent was to scatter the CIA into 1,000 points of light. He got rid of the Fed Reserve by printing silver certificates based on silver. So now, instead of being enslaved to usury debt slavery by the Fed Reserve, which is a cabal of, an illegal cabal, mind you, of private banksters that has kept America in a state of debt slavery, he bypassed them he was against Israel getting the atomic bomb. And there were several other things that he took a stand on. But he was a real American. And what did they do? They made sure to blow his brains out in pure daylight, right in front of everybody, to send a message to anyone that follows, what would happen to anyone who's willing to stand up and do the right thing. There have been many heroes that have arisen since then, but not too much in the political arena, because America has been usurped. America is controlled, and what I have discovered in all of my studies is that America is run by Israel. And if you do your studies, you will find the leaderships, the historical leaders of Israel, telling you that outright. We control America. We get America to do anything we want. Right now, we are fighting Israel's wars. I was obsessed with researching everything I could to try to find out what went wrong. Why did 9/11 occur? And the rabbit hole got quite deep. And I discovered so many things that it's just mind-boggling. It is absolutely mind-boggling. But we are controlled, we are used, and we are discarded. And our sons and daughters, they should be here at home fighting to get rid of all the treasonous traitors in the White House. When you see Congress standing up like a bunch of seals clapping for Netanyahu, who himself is a worldwide criminal. He's a criminal against human rights, human crimes against humanity. Those are all treasonous traitors. They betrayed a sacred trust. I don't consider them Americans. I consider them bought and sold out traitors. Anytime you see someone supporting Netanyahu or Israel or the Zionists, they are traitors, because those entities have shown themselves to be traitors of the United States of America. So we are in deep trouble. We are close to the economic collapse. We are close to an excuse to impose martial law, which will usher in the New World Order. And that is when you'll see a real genocidal situation occur right here at home, where great numbers of Americans will die. And this is so far-fetched that it's difficult for people who have not done the research to accept. I understand that it is a real hard pill to swallow, but nonetheless, it's the reality that we are now living on the edge of. And all we can do is, those of us who are awake and see this clearly, is try to inform others, because as I said in the beginning, if each one could reach one, there could be a paradigm shift in mindset overnight, which would be followed certainly with a revolution that would call for a drastic change of the career criminals we have in the White House at this time.
In the White House, in the Capitol building, everywhere we have the dual citizens in Congress, which I'm sure you're aware of as well. You know, the ones that have Israeli citizenship as well as American citizenship. How do you divide your loyalties thusly? It makes no sense to me. Every single thing I have said several times on this show that John F. Kennedy was the last true president that we had. You don't know this about me, but I spent a lot of years studying the Kennedy assassination.
Okay.
And it was absolutely a murder in broad daylight to make a point. It was the silver certificate thing you need to re-examine because there's a little more to that, and it's not really because of those certificates. He was battling, though, Wall Street. He was battling the military-industrial complex. He was battling the CIA. He was battling a lot of the old boy networks. He was battling a lot of the establishment, as it were, even though he wasn't really that far outside of the establishment. He was the last guy that we had in the White House who really attempted to stand up and do what was right. That's it.
Right. Now, in response to the silver certificates, that was Executive Order number 11110, in which he printed money, and if you look at the dollar, it didn't say redeemable by gold. It was redeemable by silver.
Right, I understand
you remember that, right?
Oh,
and he took away the power to issue money from the Fed Reserve.
Okay, that's not actually what happens in that, because I don't want to, I don't want to make you upset, but just try to understand that it's actually an addendum to a previous executive order which turned over what was an executive privilege to control the amount of those silver certificates to the Treasury Secretary. Okay, this is what happened. And the reason for that has something to do with the revision of the Silver Purchase Act. Those U.S. notes existed from the 1930s all the way up to 1971. A lot of people are not aware of that, and the reason why they stopped existing in 1971 is because that was when the final piece of us being backed by gold in any way, shape, or form, the gold standard, was finally disillusioned completely during the Nixon administration. And if you take a look at, and don't just believe me, but if you take a look at somebody like G. Edward Griffin, who wrote, The Creature from Jekyll Island, he wrote an article kind of breaking this down. Now, that being said, the silver certificate isn't the issue. He was, though, in the process of really doing some serious battling with them, and some of those documents have not been made public yet. There are other documents out there where he was actually doing exploratory committees and things to see what could be done about this. He was trying to limit the powers of any organization which didn't have a national interest.
He was right in line with that. He was the president of the United States, and he was having difficulty trying to get organizations such as APAC and dual citizens, so on, to register as foreign agents.
Right, and
you're aware of that.
Yeah, that, and also the fact that the CIA was absolutely lying to him, subverting and going against his orders, even to the last month of his life with Vietnam. The assassination of Diem and New was all basically allowed to happen by the local CIA people, and even his own ambassadors weren't answering to him, because he was at war with the intelligence community. He was at war with the bankers. He was at war with Wall Street. He was literally at war with all of the elite establishments that we know today. Are the root of the problem. And that's why I absolutely support your idea. Believe me, I say it all the time that Kennedy was the very last true president we had in this country, and ever after they have done nothing but erode. And that's why I said in the past 50 years,
erode our core values.
Our core values, our rights, our rights which were endowed on us by our Creator, regardless of what you think that Creator is, it doesn't really matter. Thing is, you were created, you have been created, you had a Creator, you were endowed, even if you want to just consider your parents your Creator, you were endowed by them with these rights by the fact that you were born here. Done. That's what the reality is, and all we have done ever after is erode them. And of course, post 9/11, what they did with the Patriot Act, the national defense, right? I mean, this is where you're going, I think. Absolutely. And I agree with you 1,000% about all of that. And I'm glad that you said it. And I'll tell you what else. You got about 3 more minutes if you want to get any
All right.
words out there.
Here's a famous by Joseph Stalin said this. America is like a healthy body, and its resistance is threefold. It's patriotism, its morality, and its spiritual life. If we can undermine these 3 areas, America will collapse from within. And is that not exactly what is occurring in our country now?
Yes, sir. That is exactly what's happened, is by the erosion of the thinking man, by the erosion of our values, by the erosion of our rights, by the erosion of all things which were held sacred in this country, step by step, and accelerated in the post 9/11 reality. Accelerated, I didn't say started. Accelerated in the post 9/11 reality. We have been set up in such a way as to be happy about the fact that we are being controlled. And of course, that big mechanism which does a whole lot of the dirty work is, as you said earlier, the mainstream media. And this is not reality. It is just a TV show, folks.
It's an illusion. It's an illusion. Yep. I think you pretty well sized it up. That is exactly what it is. And it's also been said, I think it was Mark Twain who said, it's easier to fool a man than to convince him that he has been fooled.
And that's true on a whole lot of levels, yeah.
Yeah, that's the bump in the road that we have to overcome as quickly as possible, because we are in great danger. There is a clear and present danger that America is about to go down and the New World Order is about to replace it. And when that happens, the velvet glove is going to come off and the iron fist is going to come out, and you'll see outright massacres, genocide, euthanasia, and so on. And these are just horrific things to even think about, but it's a reality. It's a harsh reality, and it's just waiting.
Just waiting to come upon us.
Yep.
Yes, sir. Listen, I want to thank you before my bumper music kicks in, because it's gonna in just about I think a minute and a half, and I want to thank you, sir. Is there any place where people can get more of your wisdom and get in touch with you, or anything like that you want to point people to?
Yeah, Rudy Vulcan, Vulcan, last name Vulcan, as in God of Fire and Steel, the Greek God of Fire and Steel, Vulcan. So the first name is Rudy, last name is Vulcan, and that's on Facebook. And I post all the things we've spoken about, and the things that got me to the level of awareness that I've managed to arrive at.
Well, I definitely advise you to check that out. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go right over in between mine and my wife's show and go do that and put a request through to you. I don't know if I'm on your list yet, but I hope you'll accept my friend request.
Sure. And you know, my page is open. Anybody can see it. You don't even have to be a friend to get on. You know, some of them they're blocked where you have to be an accepted friend before you could see what someone is posting. Mine is wide open, you know, but absolutely.
And so thank you one more time, sir. And anytime you want to come back on my show, you let me know if there's anything that you want to get out to people. I'll be more than happy to have you back. I really appreciate your time. And like I said, that music is just going to kick in and drown us right out. So I just wanted to let you know that. And I want to thank everybody who decided to tune in for the Ochelli Effect tonight. Really appreciate you. That's at ucy.tv/TOE in case you're catching it further downstream. And tonight's guest, Rudy Dent. An amazing discussion, extremely enlightening. And again, I'm extremely grateful to you, sir, for spending this time with us. And you are more than welcome any time.
Right back at